A young California woman left her home in January 2022, saying she was going to visit an ex-boyfriend. After that, her family never heard from her again, and that's how one of the most shocking cases in the US in recent years began. If you want to know everything that happened, stay with me until the end of the video. Hi everyone, how are you? My name is Lesma. I hope you're doing great. As always, I'm very happy to be here with you for another day. I'm very grateful that you're watching me wherever you are. Today we have a case that happened in the United States, that of Alexis Gabe. Join me to see all the details. Alexis Perry Gabe was born on March 17, 1998 in California, USA, into a family of Filipino origin. She was the second of 3 children born to Win and Rowena, a couple who immigrated to the US and married in 1994. Alexis is known to have been very close to her siblings and also very protective of them. Those who knew her described her as a charming, kind, and compassionate girl who was always happy and was very creative from a very young age. After finishing high school, Alexis dreamed of studying forensic science, but the college was too far away and she wanted to keep living with her family. So she chose to get a degree as an EKG technician. So while waiting to get into an internship program, she worked at a well-known pharmacy chain. And after that, she decided to work as a designer at a closet company, also in California. Before turning 20, Alexis is also known to have started a relationship with a 24-year-old named Marshall Curtis Jones III, who worked as a hospital security guard. Marshall is said to have been very outgoing and spent a lot of time with Alexis' family, and little by little he won their affection and they welcomed him as one of their own. But the couple wasn't doing so well, and they started to drift apart in early 2021. Although they continued to see each other on and off. Mind you, around that time Alexis had also started dating another guy who made a living as a tow truck driver. Despite her ups and downs in her love life, by early 2022 Alexis was leading a very quiet and uncomplicated life with her parents and siblings. That brings us to Wednesday, January 26th of that year. At 6 in the evening, Alexis made a video call to a friend, in which she told her she was going to visit Marshall. The couple was still in their on and off relationship. They had broken up 2 months earlier but were thinking of getting back together. By that time, the global health emergency was already in its final stages, but Alexis's parents were in quarantine because they had been infected, so they started sending her some messages to find out if she was coming home or not. At 6:30, her mother sent her the first message. Alexis replied, and then her father, a few minutes later, also spoke to her to ask if she was going to have dinner at home or not. This message got no response. At first, Alexis's parents didn't think it was strange that she didn't reply because it was very normal. In fact, on many occasions she wouldn't reply and her father had to stay up waiting for her at night. But this time was different. As I said, they were sick, so they felt bad and went to bed early. Alexis's mother got up at 8 the next morning and was surprised to find that Alexis hadn't come home and nobody knew where she was. She was responsible for taking her brother to school, and that morning she wasn't ready to do it. So that did start to seem a bit strange to them because she never neglected her responsibilities. She hadn't come home all night and something was wrong. Alexis's parents then called Marshall to ask if he knew where the girl was. He admitted that indeed she had gone to his house after 6 in the evening, but that she had left at 9 at night, supposedly to go to her best friend's house. With this information, they decided to contact the friend, but she reacted somewhat confused and told them it was impossible for Alexis to have visited her at her house because she wasn't home. She was traveling with her parents elsewhere in California. So midday arrived with no sign of Alexis, and the girl's parents asked one of her brothers to go to the police station to report her missing. Remember, they were in quarantine, so they couldn't go out. And besides this, they didn't sit idly by, and started organizing a small search with the help of family, neighbors, and friends. Volunteers were in the area handing out and putting up copies of a search poster with the young woman's photo and asking anyone in the area if they had seen her. So time went by, and on the afternoon of that same Thursday, they found Alexis's vehicle. It was abandoned about 5 minutes from her house and 1 street away from her best friend's house. The doors were unlocked and the key was in the ignition. When the parents found out about the discovery, they went out into the street, regardless of being in quarantine, and rushed to the scene. When they arrived, fearing the worst, they asked one of their sons to open the trunk. It was empty and there was no sign of Alexis anywhere. So they immediately notified the authorities of the find. The police took charge of the car as part of the investigation. In addition, it was learned that the vehicle had a GPS device, so it was going to be very easy for them to analyze the system records as well as some surveillance cameras in the area. The review of the recordings yielded crucial information for the case. The images showed a man approximately 6 feet tall with dark skin, wearing a medical mask and a beard sticking out from the bottom. He was dressed in a black hooded sweatshirt and was walking away from the vehicle he had left parked. Also, apart from this, the police were interested in speaking with Marshall, as he was the last person to have seen her alive. When they showed up at his house to question him, he again admitted that Alexis had been there in the afternoon and told them the same story he had told her parents. He also denied leaving his house all night. In addition, as part of his alibi, he said he had been talking to his father, who resided in Washington state. Although when they asked the man to corroborate his son's alibi, he denied having spoken to him. Also during that visit, Marshall gave the officers permission to search his home, except for 2 rooms. The young man also allowed them to take his phone for a few hours, without suspecting that this review would provide them with very valuable information. As they were leaving the residence, an officer saw a black pickup truck parked in front, and through the window he also saw several large trash bags and a blanket, a detail that was recorded but at that moment did not contribute anything significant to the investigation. So the new detectives also spoke with the other person Alexis was dating. But unlike Marshall, he was more receptive and willing to cooperate. Meanwhile, the girl's family was very uneasy, and they were aware that the authorities were making every possible effort. But they also wanted to help and started opening social media pages. One, specifically on Facebook, helped the case start getting more and more exposure. So, while the investigation was underway, thanks to security cameras inside a gas station, it was determined where Alexis had last been seen alive. Days went by, and on February 1st, a search warrant was executed at Marshall's home. During the search of the property, blood traces were found on the inside lid of the washing machine. In addition, the shower curtain was also missing. In the following weeks, more evidence accumulated, and it was concluded that the blood found in the washing machine matched Alexis's DNA profile. On Thursday, May 12th, another search warrant was executed at Marshall's property, and police asserted that this had been the last place Alexis was last seen alive. As we already know, he admitted she had been there. The next day it emerged that investigators had found a crucial piece in the search for Alexis: her cell phone case. However, her device was missing. For their part, Alexis's relatives continued to work tirelessly to try to locate her, and even asked for help from a civil organization that sent a team from Florida. On May 19th, the case took a turn when police revealed that Marshall's mother, a woman named Alicia Coleman, had been arrested on suspicion of accessory. However, the woman was released without charges being filed. A day later, on May 24th, it was announced that a $10,000 reward would be given for any information that helped locate Alexis. And after a few days, this was increased to $50,000. In addition, another $50,000 offered by an anonymous donor was added, bringing the figure to $100,000. On May 25th, the prosecution reported that permission had been obtained to wiretap Marshall's cell phone. The data obtained, along with surveillance camera footage and DNA evidence, were submitted for processing. The next day, charges were filed against him for murder. In a statement, the police chief announced that authorities believed Alexis's life had been taken and that Marshall was responsible. The police chief announced that there was strong proof and several pieces of evidence supporting their hypotheses. In addition to that, it was also said that Alexis's phone case contained Marshall's DNA and that the GPS tracking of her vehicle had placed it on a direct route from Marshall's residence to where the vehicle was found. In addition, he also commented that Marshall had a strange and uncooperative attitude and had refused to speak with police on several occasions. They also said that by that time Marshall had already left California and was in Washington. Once they found him in Washington, they tried to arrest him, but Marshall resisted. He lunged at one of the officers with a knife in his hand, and the conditions of his arrest, well, to be honest, were quite complicated. In the end, the police fired their service weapons and lunged at him, and he ended up dying on the spot. This was very bad for the investigation and for Alexis's family, because at that point nobody knew where the girl was. As I already told you, the authorities believed her life had been taken, so they were looking for the location of her body, and without Marshall alive, it was really going to be quite difficult. A month later, in July 2022, a manuscript by Marshall was discovered with precise directions to a remote area of Sacramento. Authorities wanted to follow these directions because they thought Alexis's remains were in that location. Phone tracking also confirmed that Marshall had gone to that area and turned off his phone the day the young woman disappeared. So, in early August, 6 months after the girl's disappearance, the timeline of events surrounding her disappearance was released. The compilation showed Marshall's actions, images, and videos, plus a detailed account of what they believed Alexis's last moments of life were like. In addition, it was also said that the route Alexis's vehicle had taken from Marshall's house to where it was found was not a route she took. It was completely contrary to the paths she usually used. It was also said that that same night, Marshall, trying to create an alibi, sent a text message to Alexis asking if she had arrived safely. Minutes later, he called her, but obviously got no response. And then the next day, as we already know, the exchange of messages between Marshall and Alexis's family took place. In addition, also in some videos taken that same day, the man could be seen on a couple of occasions throwing trash bags out of his vehicle, but it could not be determined exactly what he had thrown out. This same evidence also determined that Marshall had Alexis's phone with him the entire time, and that during the entire trip, while throwing away the trash bags, he also kept it turned on. Also on his home's doorbell camera, the man could be seen with several large, heavy trash bags, which he was taking out of his car. Let's remember that Marshall had given the police his phone to check during the first search. He went to the police station to get it back and then asked his mother to buy another one. It was also determined that the searches on the device were incriminating. For example, he searched the phrase, "How long would it take for a fish to eat a corpse?" and other things closely related to a conspiracy to commit murder. In addition to this, although the police went to the area he had marked in those directions, they found no trace of Alexis. A month after Marshall's life was taken, the young woman's family found some fragments of what is believed to be the girl's phone. The pieces were sent to the lab to be examined using forensic technology. Days later, on Friday, August 12th, several of Alexis's relatives, friends, and neighbors protested outside the DA's office. By that time, they had already gathered more than 10,000 signatures and were calling for the rearrest of Alicia, Marshall's mother, although the police hadn't actually released why they had arrested her the first time. They had simply released the detail that she had bought another phone for her son. The DA's office, in a statement, reported that Alicia had been summoned for questioning again. However, detectives were unable to obtain an admission from the woman, so the case could not be refiled. And while the family was seeking justice, the case took a turn on Thursday, November 3rd, 2022, 10 months after Alexis's disappearance. A resident using a metal detector in a remote area of Amador County found what appeared to be a human skull. He immediately notified authorities of the find, and during a search of the surrounding area, they found more bone parts. Duct tape, clothing, and black trash bags were also found at the scene. Subsequently, it was confirmed that the remains were Alexis's. According to the police report, the body had been dismembered before being hidden. Although it was practically impossible to determine the cause of death for sure, police began to believe that Marshall had suffocated her by squeezing her neck and then dismembered the body in his own bathroom. This was because of the bloodstains found at the scene and the fact that, as I told you, the shower curtain was missing. In addition to that, remember that one of the officers saw some black bags in Marshall's vehicle. These matched exactly the ones found at the scene. In total, 75% of Alexis's body parts were found at the scene, and on Saturday, June 17th, almost a year and a half after her life was taken, she was finally laid to rest. Around 50 people, including relatives, friends, and acquaintances, attended the memorial service. But for the family, there were still many questions. They believed Marshall must have had help to get rid of the remains, and were still hoping his mother would be charged with complicity. Also seeking justice, in April 2024, a documentary was released that examined many parts of the investigation, including the cameras, and also a map found in Marshall's room, where he had supposedly already planned to dump Alexis's remains. But the girl's parents were not happy with this documentary, as they felt it should have shown a segment that supposedly showed Alicia as a potential suspect. In addition to that, they also said it was Alicia who had bought him the plane ticket from California to Seattle, the place where, as we know, the police ended up taking his life. The case had a final judicial closure in January 2025, when it was concluded that Marshall had acted alone and that his mother had not acted as an accomplice at any time. With Marshall no longer alive, a judicial process couldn't really be carried out, and the case was closed. Thus ended a very bad period for Alexis's family, and the closure left them with a bittersweet taste. While Marshall is no longer with us and won't be able to hurt anyone, they also believe his mother surely had something to do with it, and in the end, they didn't get the justice they so desperately wanted. And well, that's it for today's video. A very sad case, because in the end, the justice the family expected wasn't obtained, nor did they get the answers they were hoping for, so what happened is quite complicated. If you found this video informative, remember to leave a like, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. I update several times a week. Now I'll see you in another case. Bye!